And what I'm encouraging you to do is through acceptance and through owning it, you are now able to take the power away from it of what it's been doing or what it's had over you for so many years to now start to decide, I am no longer going to allow this struggle to dictate who I am, to dictate my life, to dictate my future, to dictate what I'm going to do, what I'm going to achieve, what I'm going to accomplish, how I'm going to live my life. No more. Let's go. You are incredible. Your body has a purpose. Your life has a purpose. You were designed to live the best life possible. Hey there, what's going on, my beautiful people? Welcome back to another episode. This is Listen, You're Not Defeated, and I'm your host, David Hernandez. I'm so grateful that you can tune in. Thank you so much for joining in on this episode. And look, today I've got a very special episode. And the topic today is very near and dear to my heart. And before I jump in to talk about what I want to share in today's episode is, first, I want to ask for your permission. Look, I'm going to be talking about emotional eating, or what's also known as stress eating. And I want to ask for your permission for me to be vulnerable and for you all to allow me to really destigmatize what society and what the world has labeled emotional eating as. And I want to talk about several things here because I've opened up and I've shared with you all the experience of what my childhood was like when I lost my childhood best friend at the age of 21 to obesity. And through the journey of us growing up, I saw how my best friend struggled with emotional eating. And in that, there was a lot of shame connected to it. There was a lot of condemnation. There was a lot of self-judgment. There was a lot of embarrassment. There was a lot of emotion that he was not necessarily proud of because he struggled with eating his emotions. And so, first off, right off the bat, what is emotional eating? We look at scientifically, and then we look at what behaviorally it is. We know that it's basically dealing with our emotions with food, or better yet, releasing our emotions with food. And so emotional eating is basically, or food specifically, is basically known as a coping mechanism. Right? It's basically, I'm dealing with the stressful situation. I'm dealing with anger. I'm dealing with sadness. I'm dealing with depression. I'm dealing with this complicated emotional state that I'm in. And I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to manage it. And the only way I know how to deal with it is releasing it with food. Going to food with hopes of finding some release, with hopes of finding a satisfaction with something that I am needing in the moment. Whether it's you're needing comfort, you're needing love, you're needing validation, you're needing peace, you're needing assurance, you're needing security. There is always something that we are needing in the moment that we are dealing with our emotional state, and we're looking to find that we're needing. And because we don't know how to find it or how to deal with these emotions, we end up going to food. Before I jump in and talk more about this, one thing I want you to know is that there is no shame if today you find yourself in a situation where you struggle with emotional eating or stress eating. There's no shame in that. And I saw my best friend suffer with that and guilt trip himself and judge himself and condemn himself and live in a depressive state, in an introverted state, in a state where he did not know who the heck he was because he was ashamed of accepting or admitting that he had an emotional struggle. He had a struggle with how to express himself or to express his emotions in a healthy way. And so I want you to know there is no shame if today you struggle with emotional or stress eating. Because look, here are the facts. I did a research and I studied this in depth with a research that I did. And together, I also found some additional research that stated that 80 to 84%, okay, and hear me out, 80 to 84% of Americans admitted that at some point in their life, they struggle with emotional eating. As a staggering number as that might be, the reason I share this fact and this research stat is basically to let you know that if today you are struggling with emotional eating or stress eating, you're not alone. Many times when we're in a situation that maybe we are ashamed of, right? Let's just look at a complete different topic. Let's say that maybe you deal with anger management, or maybe you deal with, I don't know, let's just say pornography, or let's say alcoholism. Because maybe we might be ashamed of it, we feel as if we're the only ones that are dealing with this, even though we know that's not the truth. Because we are embarrassed or because there is some shame connected to it, it's hard for us to really look at that others might be also dealing with this. And we think that there's probably something wrong with me. If I struggle with emotional eating, many people believe that there is a problem with them. They beat themselves up, they judge themselves, they condemn themselves, they get angry, they say, how can you not do it? How can you not stop eating that? Why do you keep doing that? And they literally sometimes can believe that there's a problem with them. And I want you to know there is no problem with you. If today you find yourself in a emotional eating struggle or stress eating struggle, there is nothing wrong with you. And you are not alone. 84% of Americans, and I would even say that's probably now even more, have admitted to struggle with emotional eating. So now, what is emotional eating then? One, it's not a problem. It's simply a struggle. It's simply another challenge. It's simply another difficulty that maybe it could be anything else. You could deal with something else and it's the same similar struggle. Like maybe it could be laziness. Maybe it could be procrastination. Maybe it could be fear. Maybe it could be the lack of productivity, the lack of organization, the lack of being able to resist certain things, right? Maybe temptations, or again, similar to others, pornography, alcoholism, going out a lot, workaholics, right? All of those are struggles, and emotional eating is no different. There is nothing wrong with you if today you find yourself in that state. So the first thing I want to do is I want to destigmatize the fact that there has to be shame involved with emotional eating. And a lot of people struggle with accepting it or simply saying that today they do struggle with that because they think that if I am an emotional eater, I'm going to be labeled as an emotional person. I'm going to be labeled as a weak person. I'm going to be labeled as a less than somebody else person or an inferior person. I'm going to be labeled as whatever maybe today you think that label is. And you see, this is something that I am so passionate about and that I utilize and I teach with my students to help them overcome emotional eating because I saw what my friend had to deal with. And I knew that this was one of the areas that kept him trapped in not being able to fully learn how to release what he so wanted to release, which was the excess weight that he was carrying, the unhealthy lifestyle that he had, the destructive habits that he had. Today, I just want to really destigmatize the fact that labeling emotional eating as something wrong, as something weak, as something inferior, as something emotional, as something wrong or detrimental or negative. That's not true. Because I want to share with you some insight, that the purpose of this insight is really to bring hope to you. As I destigmatize this negative connotation that emotional eating or stress eating has received, I also want to bring you hope. And I want to bring you encouragement to know that if today you do find yourself struggling with emotional eating, there is good news. Because you can change that. Why? Because emotional eating is simply behavior. And now I'm going to even go further. It is learned behavior. Now you might be asking, well, David, what the crap is that? What does that mean? I'm sure you've heard of that phrase, learned behavior. What is behavior? Something that we do that expresses how we feel. If somebody is angry, how do you know they are angry? By their behavior. You might see them punch a door. You might see them slam a car door. You might see them break something. You might see them shout and scream or punch or get aggressive. That what they're expressing is behavior that is telling us they are angry. And emotional eating is the same thing. It is a learned behavior, which means at some point in your life, you learned how to release your emotions with food. You learned to go to food as your outlet, as your coping mechanism, as your release for the emotions that you are feeling given a circumstance or situation that you're living. Maybe you get news that somebody you dearly loved passed away. Maybe you get news that you've been fired. Maybe you get news that the person you truly trusted in has just shared a secret that you both vowed would never be shared. And so maybe you feel depressed. You feel taken advantage. You feel rejected. You feel abandoned. Well, at some point, whenever you were growing up, because a lot of this stems from our younger age, because when we're young is how we start to adopt our way of life, our way of dealing with things, right? The way we react, the way we respond, the way we handle situations, it all stems from our childhood. And so at some point, maybe when you were younger, you came home from school. I've used this example before. You came home from school, you had a bad day. Your mother sees that you've had a bad day. She sits down, she chats with you, and then she comes and she says, here, have this cookie so that you can feel better. Forget about the problem. Let's enjoy this cookie together so we can forget about the problem. And so that happens once, and then it happens again, and then it happens a third time. In those moments, because there's so much emotions going on, there is a association that now starts to happen. There's a connection that starts to happen. My emotions or my feelings of being sad in a bad day now associate a cookie, right, or a treat to me feeling better. So the more this pattern repeats, you are now learning that the way to deal with your bad day and your disappointment and maybe your sadness or your anger is going to a cookie or having a treat. The more this pattern repeats, because of neuroplasticity, it now starts to become your associated learned behavior on how to deal with a bad day in this example, or with some disappointment, some sadness, or some anger. And so when we are introduced to these ways of dealing with our emotions, because of repetition, the more we repeat the same behavior, we start to adopt that as our way to deal with emotions, to deal with conflict, to deal with anger, or to deal with whatever that situation has triggered in you. We need to look at and understand today, all of the behavior that you had or that you have, most of them, let's just say that, most of your behaviors, you have adopted them. You have learned them from somehow, from some way. You learned them either from somebody, you learned them through observing somebody else do it, you learned it by a suggestion that was told to you. So we learned how to do that. So today, I want to give you good news. As I destigmatize the label that has been put on emotional eating as a negative, as a destructive thing, or as something you should be ashamed of, I want you to know you can unlearn how to emotionally eat. This is great news. And I see it happen regularly with my students. I have conversations with many men and women that share intimacies about their life. And many of them carry so much pain, so much heaviness and sadness and self-condemnation because they are ashamed of admitting that they struggle with emotional eating. I remember the story of, I'm going to change her name just for the sake of her well-being. Her name was Sarah. And she came in with the struggle of always going to chocolate. She said, David, I don't know why I can't give up chocolate. Every time something happens, when I am stressed, when I'm just in a challenged state, things are not going my way, I just really crave chocolate. And so we discussed this. We went through my 4-step process to help her identify what was really happening here. And as we started digging deep and going into really looking at what was happening in this whole midst of this situation, what was triggering her, when did this potentially start? We look at, there's 4 things that I utilize with my students. And number 1 is identifying where did this start potentially? What is the root cause? When can I remember something happening that drew me to, in this example of Sarah, was chocolate? Can we remember a moment? Can we remember a situation, an event that happened that really takes me to that place to where, oh, I remember this happened and I started going to chocolate? The next step is really looking at, well, what situations or what circumstances trigger me? And a lot of times this trigger is going to be very similar to the root cause. And when we look at this trigger, we look at, well, what is happening that causes me to get, I like to say, to get ticked or to get you to basically become activated, right? For your desire to want to go to chocolate, right? Or it could be you're triggered. The trigger could be anger. The trigger could be sadness. The trigger could be rage. The trigger, whatever. What happens that triggers you, that makes you tick, that then will lead you to want to go to chocolate in this example. And then the third one is looking at, well, what is my emotional and physical response? What happens in my body? How do I respond when I am triggered? What emotions come up? But we really want to get very specific with this, identifying. And I like to say we want to use the power of specificity. Really identifying specifically what is happening. What am I feeling? I feel like my stomach's getting a knot. I feel like my blood circulation is starting to just accelerate. My heart is pumping. I'm starting to get goosebumps. I'm starting to sweat. I'm starting to want to pace, right? What are those things? Where do you feel it in your body? What do you feel in your body? 1, 2, and 3. And then the fourth one is looking at, well, what specifically do I want to go to when I am triggered, right? What am I drawn to? If it's chocolate, in the case of Sarah, well, what type of chocolate? Is it white chocolate? Is it dark chocolate? Is it Hershey's? Is it Twix? These things are important to understand or to learn because there's always an association connected to that. Why is it dark chocolate? Oh, because I remember when I was little, that was the dark chocolate that was always in my grandmother's glass tin, for example. It gives us insight as to where does all of this come from. The more insight that we can get, the less judgment we're going to have on ourselves, because we're going to be able to identify it's coming from something else. And more importantly, what I want you to know is a lot of these things that you are dealing with, you had no control of them, especially if they started from a young age. So therefore, there's nothing to judge yourself on. There's nothing to be ashamed of. You've just not been given the proper insight to be able to change the behavior today so that you no longer go to food, but we go to another healthy outlet. So back to the story of Sarah. We went through this 4-step process and we identified that when she was under a lot of anxiety or stress, where she did not have confidence in herself. Now, this is critical. She did not have confidence in herself to make the proper choices. She would get really stressed and she would want chocolate. Now, why chocolate? Well, we found out that chocolate is what her grandmother gave her when she was younger, when she had a bad day, when she was dealing with self-confidence issues, when she was dealing with doubts or self-doubts. Her grandmother would comfort her, give her love, tell her everything was going to be okay, and then give her a piece of dark chocolate. The more that was done, because her grandmother raised her, she created a deep connection with chocolate, grandmother, comfort, and peace, or comfort and love, or comfort and release, comfort and security, comfort and confidence. And so it's not that she was wanting chocolate when she was in those moments, it's that she was wanting the comfort and the love of her grandmother to tell her everything was going to be okay. But now here's the thing. It could be easily said, well, why didn't she just call her grandma? Well, what we also learned is that her grandmother had passed away a couple years ago. So she didn't have no longer that connection with physical grandmother, where she could pick up a phone call or pick up a phone to call, send a message, or reach out in some way. When we figured out that she was not attracted to chocolate, what she was really wanting or what she was really needing, like I said at the beginning of the episode, every time we're going to, in this case, food, it's because we're trying to feel something that we are needing inside of us. In this case, she was needing comfort, love, support, peace. And the only connection that she had of the way to deal with it was chocolate. This was an amazing breakthrough for her. She learned really quickly that there was no problem with her any longer. Like she had thought for many years, there's a problem with me. Why can't I just stop? Why can't I just stop? There has to be something wrong with me. I must be the problem. I must be the problem. There's something wrong. It's not the case. And secondly, it gave her the insight of knowing, oh, I am really needing this when I'm under this situation. When I am triggered by this, I'm needing this to be able to handle the situation better. And so now instead of going to food, we were able to create a healthy option for her that still would remind her of her grandmother, because that's what would bring her peace and joy and comfort and satisfaction and help her get through that situation. We identified a healthy way that she could still connect with her grandmother without having to go to chocolate. And now today she's been able to release that strong urge of chocolate when she is feeling self-conscious or has a low self-esteem because she doesn't know how to deal with the specific situation. That changed her life. And it brought her hope of knowing that she could now do this in every other situation that she's been dealing with when it comes to emotional eating. So I really just want to bring hope in this episode for many of the viewers here, for all the audience of, if you are in a situation today where maybe you find yourself emotional eating, or even the opposite, emotional non-eating, because that's also another case, right? That maybe today you struggle with some of that. I want you to know that there is hope to be able to change that. You can unlearn, even though this is probably not proper English, for sakes of understanding, you can unlearn how to emotionally eat. The same way you learned how to do it, utilizing a practical approach, we can change your behavior so you can unlearn how to emotionally eat and learn how to do a new behavior that is healthy and still allows you to release our emotions. Because look, we all have a coping mechanism. We need it to survive as humans, because we need to find a way to release everything that we are feeling. It helps us stay sane. And it helps us be humans. Otherwise, we would be doing some crazy things that would probably get us into some major trouble regularly. So I don't know where you're at today. I don't know if you are struggling with emotional eating, stress eating, boredom eating. They're all the same. Many people, when they're bored, they'll sit there in front of the TV. They're not hungry, but they're just eating treats, eating snacks. They're bored, they're eating. Again, we learned how to do that. But I want to encourage you today. And I want to bring some boldness into you, to encourage you to accept it. Don't be ashamed of saying, I struggle with this. You know, there's power in vulnerability. There is power when you accept. And now when I say accept, I'm not necessarily saying I'm accepting that I am an emotional eater and that's it. So therefore I'm never going to change. And this is it. I'm accepting it. This is just who I am. So you got to deal with it. No. Now, if you want to choose that, that's fine. You're going to have to deal with those consequences. But when I say accept, it's basically just owning it, saying, yes, I struggle with this. Because when we take an acceptance, or when we own it, that we do struggle with something, I don't care what it is. I'm talking about emotional eating right now and stress eating, but it could be maybe you struggle with drugs, alcohol. You struggle with infidelity. You struggle with pornography. You struggle with, you name it, with resting. When we accept that we have a challenge, that there's a struggle, we are struggling to be able to get better in that area, we can then open the door to an opportunity to be able to change that. Many people live suppressing it, in denial, in regret, in this false or this imaginary life that it doesn't exist. That's not me. No, I'm not emotional. I'm not weak. I'm not that. I don't deal with that. Okay, fine. You can live in denial, which is really not going to change anything. All it's doing is you're allowing it to continue to have power over you, and it is dictating who you are, what your life should be like, and how you should live your life. And what I'm encouraging you to do is through acceptance and through owning it, you are now able to take the power away from it of what it's been doing or what it's had over you for so many years, to now start to decide, I am no longer going to allow this struggle to dictate who I am, to dictate my life, to dictate my future, to dictate what I'm going to do, what I'm going to achieve, what I'm going to accomplish, how I'm going to live my life. No more. I am going to decide. And I decide that by humbling myself, recognizing that I have a struggle so that I can then open the door to opportunity to be able to change that. So that's the first thing. And you know what? It takes a lot of courage. And yes, it's a little scary. And yes, it might be a little hard. And yes, you do have to be a bit vulnerable. And yes, maybe some people may think, look at him, look at her. She struggles with this, she struggles with that. Look, here's the reality. We cannot control what other people think. And a lot of times we live life being so afraid of what other people think. We're so reluctant to live our life because we are afraid what others might think. We live under this idea. What is he going to think of me? What is she going to think of me? Look, that doesn't help. That doesn't solve the situation. Now, as a matter of fact, they're going to have an opinion regardless. Because we can't control what people think or say. Matter of fact, they have a right to have their opinion. But living afraid of what others are going to think of us is only going to keep us trapped in that struggle. So yes, it might be challenging. But when you go through that challenge, things start to break. There's freedom that starts to come. There is this release that happens. There's this weight and this burden on top of you that you've been carrying for so many years because of what others might think of you, because of what society might say, because of what the label has been given over it. Whatever is in our thoughts, it weighs us down. But when we say, yeah, I struggle with it. I'm not perfect. Look, we're human. We all struggle with things. We all as humans struggle with challenges. I've struggled with depression. I used to emotionally eat. As a matter of fact, I used to also emotionally not eat. But when we accept it, we say, yes, I am struggling with it. That is the first step to being able to change the circumstance, to be able to have power over it, to then now start to dictate how you want your life to be. And then step two is, if we are struggling with it, we accept it, we remove the shame. There is no shame in being human. Look, as humans, we all have our challenges. Like I said, that's what makes us human. But step two would then be, let's get some help. Let's get some help. In the same way Sarah sought help, and in the same way others of my students sought help. It's okay to seek help. It's hard sometimes for us as humans to ask for help because a lot of times our ego does not let us, or our fear does not let us, which is still linked to ego. Or this idea of what others are going to think of us because we're asking for help can stop us from living the life that we desire, or being the man and the woman that we truly want to be. So don't be ashamed. Don't be ashamed. Today, I want to encourage you and empower you, like I said, to own it. There is courage when we own it and we say, yeah, I do struggle with it. So what? Now you take the power away from it. And now, you know what? Whatever they say, whatever they think, you know what? It's their opinion. Everybody has a right to have their opinion, but you don't have to believe what they say. And the moment you start to believe what they say, it's no longer their fault. Now it's your fault for agreeing with it and believing it. Because the sooner we can accept that everybody has a right to have an opinion, but I don't have to believe everything that they say, what people say will no longer affect you as much. And the more you practice, we're going to be like butter. It's going to rub off of us. I love you. No shame. There is no shame. There is no shame. No shame. And for years, I was even embarrassed about speaking openly about emotional eating because I was literally thinking, well, a lot of people aren't going to want to listen. They're not going to tune in because they are going to be in denial. I'm not emotional. That's not me. And I'm not going to be able to help as many people. I said, you know what? No more. Because I want to destigmatize emotional eating, and I don't care what others have thought of it or what their idea is of it. I am going to speak openly about it to encourage you to step out and be bold and be courageous and own if today you are struggling with it, but more importantly, say, I'm not going to stay in this place. That is when the owning it has a powerful value and impact. When you say, yes, I struggle with this, but I'm not going to stay here. I'm not going to allow this to define who I am. I'm not going to allow this to dictate my life or who I'm going to become. I am going to do whatever it takes to get out of this situation, handle this struggle, and become the person that I want to be and live the life that I want because I deserve it and because you can do it. So just know that you are incredible and that you have everything inside of you that you need to live the life that you desire. And there is power inside of you. There is potential inside of you, and you were designed to live the best life. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for joining in today's episode. Remember, I am here every week. Jump on in, tune in. Every week, I'm bringing a new topic in for you. I am just excited for you to join me on this journey through this amazing, amazing program. Listen, you're not defeated. As I say it again, you're not defeated. Go out, live your best life. Remember, you are incredible, and I will catch you on another episode. My name is David Hernandez, your host, and this is Listen, You're Not Defeated. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.